So the first research talk is going to be from Martin Foys, who's going to talk about citation and granularity in the future of digital humanities scholarship, in particular showing us some case studies from the digital Mappa 3.0 project and the Old English Poetry in Facsimile project. Welcome, Martin.
All right, thanks. And also thanks a lot to the DSI and the Data Science, the Data Hub, and all of this, and Sarah for organizing this. It's thrilling to be able to kick this off, and thank you for being here. My talk is going to have three very brief sections to it, right? I'm going to sort of talk about how I got here originally, and then I'm going to talk about my current research on data annotation and linking, and then I'm going to talk about sort of what the next sort of step is. I should point out at the beginning, I am not a data scientist. I am, in the popular imagination, probably the opposite of a data scientist. I am a medievalist. I'm a professor of Old English literature. But my goal really has been since my doctoral work in the 90s, to kind of bridge the gap between the methods of traditional humanist work and the potential of digital tools and data. So in many ways, my work and my talk today look both forward and backwards. So when I say I'm a medievalist and I work on Old English literature, a lot of people kind of think that this is what I do. And I guess in some way that's accurate. There's Beowulf, or at least a popular imagination of what Beowulf is, but really, famous Old English epic poem from the 10th century. But really, what I do is something more like this. There's the actual manuscript text of the Old English Beowulf manuscript. Actually not showing Beowulf there, but another Old English poem about Judith, this great heroic Old Testament woman who cut off the head of an evil tyrant king, Holofernes, who was trying to rape her. So how did I get here? Thinking about the notions of Old English manuscripts and the need to kind of digitally edit them in new ways. Well, it started with my doctoral work on the Bayeux Tapestry, which is a 230-foot long embroidery from the 11th century depicting the events of the Battle of Hastings in 1066, which led to the Norman Conquest and basically the fundamental change of all of kind of English and therefore American culture as we know it. But, you know, it might not be that important for everybody else. And this indeed is it, right? There it is. It's all woven threads on a linen background. It's really cool. And as part of my doctoral work, I created a digital edition of this on CD-ROM in 1998, which was then published as my first major scholarly work in 2003. It is astonishing that it is still accessible online. There'll be QR codes every once in a while if you just kind of want to grab that for later to take a look at it. Here it is in its kind of ported version by the publisher online. You can zoom through it, you can look at it, and it's all great. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because when I started, this is how you studied the Bayeux Tapestry in a print, and this was a very high-end version, nice in color and everything, but in a print facsimile. And that was the only way to study a 230-foot long embroidery. And it had the physical medium necessitated fundamentally taking away parts of its nature and character, and so in some ways hindering the way in which it could be studied. And I'm not here to say that digital media, of course, then allows you to do away with all those problems. Of course, they introduce their own limits of media and well. But we were able to. I realized as I took these threads and turned them into pixels, we were able to do a lot more in very interesting ways. We were essentially turning, this old physical media into new digital data, and that gave me a lot of ideas for how I wanted to kind of move forward. And the next thing I wanted to really think about was medieval maps. Here is the Cotton map of the world, dates from around the late 10th century in England. It's really cool. If you want to kind of orient yourself with it, it's basically a map of Europe, but it's literally oriented with east at the top. So there's England, there's the Mediterranean. You can kind of just turn it and get a sense of it. And I really wanted to do for these kinds of maps what I did for the Bayeux Tapestry, which is create a digital edition of it, right? And as I was doing that, I realized, well, what you need to do is create these associations and relationships between the geographic moments of these maps, the text, the inscriptions, and their locations to help users understand exactly what they're looking at. A lot of these maps are derived from classical and medieval geographic texts, descriptions of the world. And so there was an association with text and image that you wanted to be able to bring together. And as I was doing this, I realized that what we really needed was a platform where we could easily tag moments on images and moments on texts and associate and relate them to each other, to link them to each other, and then also create annotated data that can hang off of them. The elevator speech of this is, you know how you can tag somebody on Facebook or whatever. It's kind of like that, but for scholarship, for collections, digital cohorts of curated cohorts of images and of texts that have been digitized. This led to the Digital Mappa project, which is a platform more than a project. It's basically an environment for creating annotated and linked data for people who don't know how to create annotated and linked data. It allows you to assemble collections of images and text digitally and then basically identify moments on them, relate them to each other, and then hang textual data off of them. I'll quickly jump off and show you exactly what that is and what that means. So let me show you what this means. So when I developed Digital Mappa, I immediately then applied it to my interest in medieval maps and developed this project confusingly now called the Virtual Mappa Project, which is different than the Digital Mappa Project. But I'll show you what this kind of looks like. So here is that cotton map. Here's our cotton map again. You'll see it's got a bunch of highlights and targets and everything all over it. We'll just zoom in real quick on one. At random, we'll pick this guy, one of the tribes of Israel that's represented on this map. There you go, nice little bit of annotated data there. Handily for me, though picked at random, it's got an embedded moment of text in there that takes you to, ironically, a second representation of the tribe of Zebulon on this map as well. And so you're instantly able to go to each moment on these maps respectively, kind of being targeted from this textual data. The point here, though, is that there's a kind of symmetrical way in which you can annotate data on both images and texts, right? As you create a tag on an image, you can also create a tag on a text. Once you create one of those active highlights, you can do basically two very powerful things with it. You can link it to any other highlight on any other image or text, or you can create a textual annotation itself, which then can have embedded in it more highlights that can link you to other places and all these sorts of things. So this is a very simple kind of first level set of annotations and linked data. Doesn't go very deep, but you can imagine how complex that can be. I'm going to show you now what you need to do to be able to do this, which is not a lot. What you need to know to be able to do this, which is not a lot at all. In fact, we're just going to, on the fly here, import a new image. I should note you can import visual data from local uploads, IIIF platforms, or just through persistent URLs on the web. But here we'll just load this map again from my local computer. And I'm going to really hope that this, there, yeah, good. Connection's pretty good. So here it is, right? And once you have that, it's as simple as creating a box around something. So let me select this guy. There we go. Once you do that, you've got an active highlight. Once you do that, you can create some textual data that is attached to it. Once you have that textual data, you can highlight some of that textual data, and then on it goes. So you get the basic idea of how this all works. So let me switch back to my presentation. So this is Digital Mappa, which we published in 2021 with generous support from the War Foundation, so thank you so much. And it's existing in its 2.0 iteration, which has all of its core functionality in there. We'll talk about what we still need to do with it in terms of its data structure in a minute. But what this led me to then is back to my own work as a medievalist and an Old English scholar. And what I thought is, well, what's the big kind of thing I can do with this platform now that I've built it? We annotated a lot of digital maps, a cohort with the British Library of 13. That was really cool. But then I was like, okay, what's even bigger than that I can do? And I thought, well, Old English poetry, right? Old English poetry is not just Beowulf. There's over 400 surviving poems of Old English poetry. Not a huge corpus or data set, really only about 31,000 lines, but pretty huge for medievalists trying to study it. Here's what it's each poem has been edited between 3 and 5 times over the past 100 years or so. And here currently is what the editorial archive looks like. This is in my room, in my study at home. Right? That's it, right? It's kind of collection of books that you have to assemble and read through in order to kind of learn about all the different editorial arguments about each individual moment and everything. And so I thought, well, what happens if we then use digital Mappa to produce a new set of editions of all of these poems, but instead of centering the text, which is what these books do, again, the limitation of these sorts of physical media and the ways in which they engender certain ideas about scholarship, instead of centering the text, we center the physical manuscript in digital form, which leads us to all sorts of new kinds of ideas and breakthroughs about methodologies and how we understand the poem that it's going. And this led then to the Old English Poetry and Facsimile project, which I started in 2019. We're about halfway through now. Our goal is to digitally edit back to facsimile, re-edit the entire corpus of surviving Old English poetry, which is now also all available. About 96% of it is available now online, freely accessible as digital facsimile in various repositories around the world, mostly England and France. So I meant to say, here's the technical stuff about digital Mappa, how it works. I'm not a data scientist. This is the limit of what I can explain to you. But basically, it runs through a Postgres database on the back end. It's being served up through a React application and then served up on the web through Python. Literally, that's about all I can say about it, because the whole point is this is built for people like me who aren't data scientists but need now to create annotated and linked data. So here's OEPF. Currently, we have completed 225 editions of the 415 works. It's about 47.3% of the corpus. We're not doing Beowulf because a pioneering scholar, Kevin Kiernan, about 10 years ago, produced an electronic edition of Beowulf to digital facsimile, which is amazing because A, it's Beowulf, and B, it's 10% of the corpus that we don't need to do now. So actually, when you take that and also Cadman's hymn, which also already survives into account, we're now at 57%, almost 60% of the way through this. And so here's what this looks like. Right, so here's why this is kind of important for thinking about data, and maybe not big data, but certainly bigger data in terms of what we do as medieval scholars. Here's a poem, Juliana from the Exeter book, and I'm gonna just sort of show you one moment within it. I mean, I do like soundtracks when I talk. I'm just going to zoom in on one moment here. So one of the things we realized as we began to work on this is that editors in the 19th century moving forward really kind of had a lot of strong ideas about what Old English poetry should be. And they often kind of just corrected it or fixed it or improved it in ways that then became set and canonical. And what we're learning is the more and more we just privilege and center the manuscript, we kind of want to undo those. We want to say, well, maybe what's actually surviving in the text is supposed to be the text. Or even if it isn't, even if it's an accident, maybe we don't want to elide or erase that. Instead, we want to build a kind of layered editorial archaeology that reveals what people have done in the past, but also attempts to preserve what is also literally there on the page. And so here's kind of just one example of this. Here's a word, Thraeamidalicha, and it's been, as you see here, often amended to a different form, Thraeandalicha, and I won't go into all of what this means. It's quite possible that the M and the N and the I was confused for an M at some point. But if you dig into the corpus, and this is the great thing, is we now have the entire Old English corpus available, parsed grammatically through a variety of different data sets. You're allowed to kind of do these kinds of searches and explore these kinds of words in ways that editors from 50 or 100 years ago weren't able to, and you're able to discover a lot of things. You're able to discover all these different kinds of survivals of these words that any single individual scholar might not have been aware of. And that allows you to assemble more data, assemble more information, and make stronger claims for well, maybe this information, maybe this version of the text isn't a mistake. Or if it was a mistake, it became a mistake that became, as we understand often to happen in language, became linguistically valid. And so we preserve it. We don't undo it. We don't amend it. In fact, we restore and retain. And so this is what we're kind of doing now. I don't have a lot of time to go on more about that, but that kind of lets us kind of understand what a platform like Digital Mappa, which is allowing you to annotate data together, allows you to do, where you begin to basically produce your own data set as you edit. And so that grows and grows and grows, and becomes its own more powerful tool for being able to parse all of the kind of editorial arguments and linguistic and textual data and literary data at the same time, as opposed to having to kind of go through all these different books everywhere else. I should point out, as we kind of go back here, I wanted to show this real quick on the fly. So you can do this already in something like the Virtual Mappa project, which has not one map, but 13 maps. So say you're interested in representations of Rome. You can do a quick search here, and you get all these different representations of Rome, right? So you're like, oh, well, here it is in the Cotton Mappa that we were just looking at, right? So you can look at that. But then, of course, you've got all the other maps that also have Rome in it. And so I won't belabor the point, but you can kind of quickly bring yourself to all of this kind of comparative data here to check out. So there's Rome in the Higdon map, there's Rome in the Cotton map. All right, so back to my kind of concluding section of the talk. So what has to happen now with this work? Well, this kind of brings me to my kind of closing set of points here, which is we've done DM 2.0, the platform, which produces the core functionality of all this, the ability to produce the data, to create the links, to kind of create that bridge that I talked about at the beginning of a traditional methodologies of a humanist scholar, but being able to do that work as you've always done, but now already digitally, already kind of creating data that you can do more with. But that doing more with is what the next step of our work needs to be, and the next step of the platform. What we cannot yet do in Digital Mappa is export all this data for it to be used in other ways, right? And so that's kind of key and huge. We also cannot archive all of that data so when the Digital Mappa platform is no longer viable in 20 or 25 years, all this work just doesn't go away. So that's a big platform in terms of what we need to be able to do in DM 3.0. But then also, in a kind of more transformative mode, we're also really focused on this idea of citationality and granularity. Every single moment that you saw on those projects, all those highlights, the data structure architecture is already set up to allow those to be produced as persistent URLs. So like any kind of moment you create in one of those projects could then be published as a link that would take you right to that moment. Kind of think about it kind of like kind of like the new footnote, if you will, right? Agile, targeted, linked, dynamic, and precise for digital publishing. So, because right now we're just in this very remediatory phase where we do what we've always done in text, but we now do it like online. I mean, you can still read your PDFs and all these sorts of things, but we're not taking advantage of the idea that we have the capacity to produce all this linked data and then reproduce the kind of precision of that linked data, those moments that you actually want to reference and cite in a way that kind of just becomes transparent and immediate. And so a platform like Digital Mappa will allow you to do that as you're producing this scholarship in your traditional and now progressive methodologies. You're also producing the data that can then instantly be brought into digital publications to target and create a network through the digital publications online of network scholarship in a way that was just frankly impossible in print media. Of course, all this takes money, and you're going to laugh, but I literally need to raise about $75,000 to finish this. I'm sure a couple of scientists in the room just have that lying around in their labs. So, if you happen to have ideas for helping me kind of close the deal and raise the money to finish Digital Mappa 3.0, I would love to hear from you. There's a couple of QR codes for all the things I just cited if you're interested, and I'm done. Thank you.